The paper trembled in Robert Hendrick's weathered hands. $85,000. The number blurred as fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the hospital's financial office. Behind the sterile desk, Catherine Miller's expression remained unchanging. "No payment up front means no surgery. Mr. Hendricks, hospital policy." On the wall behind her, a digital clock counted down mercilessly. 4 days remaining. Bob glanced at his phone screen. Balance $3,200. His life savings, measured in the space between a surgery and a grave. Through the glass door, he caught movement. Tommy, his 14-year-old grandson. Phone raised, recording. Everything. Sarah stood beyond him in the hallway, shoulders shaking, unable to enter. The abscess behind Bob's ear throbbed, swollen tight as a fist. When, he wondered distantly, had living become more expensive than dying? The paper slipped from his fingers, drifting to the linoleum floor. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 3 weeks earlier, Robert Hendricks sat in a folding chair beside Lake Michigan. Dawn breaking gold across the water. His fishing line barely moved in the still morning. George Walsh, 70 years old and solid as the oaks behind them, poured coffee from a dented thermos. "Beautiful morning." "Bobby," George said, his voice rough from decades of unfiltered cigarettes and battlefield memories. Bob nodded, but his hand drifted to the spot behind his right ear. A small scratch, barely noticeable. He'd caught it on a low branch the day before. Nothing worth mentioning. Back in his apartment, the silence pressed against him like a physical weight. He set a single plate on the kitchen table. The refrigerator hummed, half empty. Containers marked with dates long past. On the counter, a framed photograph showed a different time Jennifer. His wife, laughing in summer sunlight. Sarah, their daughter, maybe 10 years old, gap-toothed and grinning. That house was gone now, sold 6 months ago. Bob picked up his phone. No missed calls. The log showed 9 days since anyone had tried to reach him. He scrolled to Sarah's number, his thumb hovering over the call button, then locked the screen. She worked night shifts at the intensive care unit. She had Tommy to raise alone. She had enough weight to carry across town. Sarah Hendricks stumbled through her front door at 7 in the morning, scrubs wrinkled, exhaustion etched into her face. She dropped her bag and found Tommy still awake, slumped at the kitchen table with his laptop, headphones covering his ears. He didn't look up. She touched his shoulder. He flinched, pulling away. "Tommy, you need to sleep." "So do you." His eyes never left the screen. She wanted to argue, to push, to demand he look at her. Instead, she walked to her room and closed the door. The memory struck her then, unbidden and sharp. 3 years ago, before everything shattered, Jennifer oiled and vibrant at the stove, Bob carving a turkey, making Tommy laugh with his terrible jokes. That dining table crowded with voices and warmth. She pressed her palms against her eyes until stars bloomed behind her eyelids. Meanwhile, Bob touched the scratch behind his ear again. It itched now, red and raised. He found antibiotic ointment in the bathroom cabinet and dabbed it on. The tube was expired by 2 years. He applied it anyway. By the 3rd day, the itch became heat. The heat became swelling. Bob pressed his fingers against the tender skin and winced. In the mirror, his reflection showed an old man with thinning gray hair and stubborn pride carved into every line of his face. George called, "You comin' fishing this weekend?" "Feeling a bit off," Bob admitted. You seen anyone about it?" "It's nothing, George. Just a bug bite. Bobby, I'm fine." The words came out harder than intended. "I've survived worse than a damn insect." George fell silent on the other end. Bob ended the call and swallowed 3 aspirin without water. The bitter taste familiar on his tongue. Day 7 arrived with vertigo. Bob woke and immediately regretted standing. The room tilted sideways, furniture sliding in his peripheral vision. He gripped the doorframe, breathing hard through his nose until the world steadied. His glasses wouldn't sit right anymore. The swelling behind his ear had grown too large, pushing everything forward at an awkward angle. He tried his hearing aid next. Pain shot through his skull the moment plastic touched inflamed skin. He threw it on the bathroom counter with a curse. The grocery store felt like walking through water. Fluorescent lights stabbed at his eyes. Other shoppers moved around him in blurred shapes. At the checkout, he fumbled for his wallet, hands shaking. The cashier's mouth moved, but he couldn't hear her properly without the hearing aid. He nodded, hoping it was the right response, and left, at home. He tried to cook dinner. Simple task. Heat soup? But his hands wouldn't cooperate. The pot slipped. Clattering against the stove, tomato soup splashed across the counter, the floor, his shirt. Bob stared at the mess and felt something crack inside his chest. He cleaned it up, went to bed at 8 in the evening. The pillow felt like concrete against his right side, so he turned left, curling around the pain that had become his constant companion. At 11:30, he woke to pressure in his bladder. The bathroom was 10 feet away. He swung his legs out of bed and stood. The floor vanished beneath him. Bob hit the tile hard, shoulder first, then his head. Glass bottles crashed from the cabinet above. Shampoo pooled around his cheek. He tried to push himself up, but his arms felt disconnected, distant. Something warm trickled from his ear. In the dim light, it looked black. Time became strange. He might have lain there for seconds or hours. The cold seeped through his skin, into his bones. Then voices, young, panicked. "Grandpa, Grandpa, wake up!" Hands on his shoulders. Tommy's face swam into view, pale and terrified. The boy was supposed to be at home. 2 blocks away. How did he get in the spare key to... Right. Sarah had insisted Bob give Tommy a copy. "I'm calling Mom," Tommy said, phone already at his ear. "Mom, it's Grandpa. Something's really wrong." Bob wanted to tell him not to bother Sarah. She'd just finished her shift. She needed rest. But his mouth wouldn't form the words. More time passed in strange jumps. Then Sarah was there, still wearing her hospital scrubs, hair pulled back in a ponytail that had come half undone. Her nurse's hands moved over him with professional efficiency, checking his pulse, his temperature, examining the grotesque swelling behind his ear. "Dad, how long has this been like this?" Her voice shook despite the clinical training. "Just tonight," Bob managed. I'm fine." Tommy made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "He's lying. Mr. Walsh told me Grandpa's been sick for a week." Sarah's eyes went hard. "Why didn't you tell me? You're busy. I didn't want—" "I'm your daughter, not a stranger." The words came out raw. She pressed her fingers against her temples, breathing hard. "George called me yesterday. I didn't think it was this bad. God, I should have come sooner." Tears tracked down her cheeks. Bob reached up with a trembling hand and touched her wrist. His baby girl, When had she gotten so tired? When had those lines appeared around her eyes? "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have listened." They both wept then, two people who'd forgotten how to reach for each other, clinging together on a bathroom floor, surrounded by broken glass. "We're going to the hospital," Sarah said, her voice steadier now. "Right now." The drive passed in silence. Tommy sat in the back seat, watching his mother and grandfather with an expression too old for his 14 years. For the first time, he understood that adults could be scared, that they could break at a red light. Tommy reached forward and took his grandfather's hand. Bob looked back, surprised. They hadn't touched in months, maybe longer. The emergency room doors slid open. Bright lights, antiseptic smells, the sound of machines and urgent voices. A nurse approached with a clipboard behind her. The waiting area overflowed with people in various states of crisis. This would take hours. Bob's hand tightened around Tommy's. The boy squeezed back. They waited. The emergency room doctor pushed through the curtain, and Robert Hendricks felt the air leave his lungs. Michael Barrett, 30 years older, hair gone silver at the temples, but unmistakably the same man, the same sharp blue eyes that had stood beside Bob at his wedding, the same mouth that had smiled too tightly when Bob and Jennifer announced their engagement. "Of all the doctors," Bob said quietly. Barrett stopped mid-step, his clipboard lowering. "Of all the patients." A pause stretched between them like a chasm. "Hello, Bob." Sarah looked between them, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Tommy sat motionless in the corner chair, watching everything with the quiet intensity he'd developed over the past year. Barrett cleared his throat and became professional. "Let's have a look at this abscess." His hands were gentle as they examined the swelling. Bob closed his eyes, transported back to a different time. Dorm rooms at the university, late-night study sessions, Barrett and Bob, inseparable since freshman orientation. Then Jennifer walked into their English literature class, auburn hair catching autumn sunlight through tall windows. Barrett had asked her to coffee first. She'd said no, kindly but firmly. Then Bob had worked up the courage 2 weeks later. She'd said yes. Barrett had smiled at the news, clasped Bob's shoulder, said he was happy for them both. But something had shifted, something had broken that never quite healed. The wedding, Barrett as best man, giving a toast that was perfect and hollow. Afterwards, the distance grew. Phone calls went unreturned. Then nothing. 30 years of silence. "Initial assessment suggests a postauricular abscess," Barrett said, bringing Bob back to the present. "Infection from that scratch developed rapidly. We'll drain it, start you on antibiotics. You'll be fine." Sarah exhaled relief. "It's just an infection. We can handle this." "Oh, what's the cost?" Bob asked. Barrett's jaw tightened. "Let's focus on treatment first. I'm asking the cost. Mr. Hendricks, we need to address the immediate issue. How much, Michael?" The use of his first name made Barrett pause. "The drainage and antibiotics. Maybe 3,000 for everything. But I'm ordering a CT scan to be certain there's no deeper involvement." "I don't need a scan." "Dad, please." Sarah interjected, just to be sure. Bob wanted to refuse. Every dollar mattered now. But the fear in his daughter's eyes made him relent. "Fine." They performed the drainage within the hour. The relief was immediate and profound. Bob felt almost human again as the pressure released. Barrett injected local anesthetic, made a small incision, and the infected fluid drained into sterile containers. The pain that had been his constant companion for days finally retreated. "See?" Bob said to Sarah, as they wheeled him to imaging. "Nothing to worry about." But Barrett's expression remained troubled as he watched them go. 6 hours later, Bob sat in a private consultation room, Sarah beside him, Tommy standing near the door, arms crossed. Barrett entered carrying films, his face grave in a way that made Bob's stomach drop. "It's not a simple abscess," Barrett began. He clipped the scans to the light box. "This is a cholesteatoma, a rare growth that develops from chronic ear infections left untreated." Bob stared at the images. A mass of tissue, bright white against the gray of his skull, pressing inward. "How long?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. "This has been growing for decades, 40 years, maybe more." Barrett turned to Bob. "Did you ever have a significant ear infection? Something a doctor told you needed surgery?" Memory surfaced, unwanted and sharp. Bob at 28. A different doctor's office. Jennifer 7 months pregnant with Sarah. Glowing and beautiful and needing prenatal vitamins, special foods, proper care. The doctor explaining that Bob's chronic ear infection required surgical intervention. $3,000. Bob had looked at Jennifer's swollen belly and made a choice. His wife and unborn child over his own discomfort. He'd told himself the infection would heal on its own. He'd been wrong. "It doesn't matter," Bob said now. "It matters," Barrett replied. "The cholesteatoma has eroded into your mastoid bone. It's pressing against your brain. You have maybe 2 weeks before the window for surgery closes." 2 weeks? Sarah stood abruptly. "What happens after 2 weeks?" "The damage becomes irreversible, meningitis, brain abscess, or the surgery becomes impossible to perform safely." Barrett met Bob's eyes. "After that point, the outcome is certain." The word he didn't say hung in the air: death. "What are the surgical risks?" Sarah asked, her nurse's training taking over. "Significant? Hearing loss, facial paralysis, meningitis, stroke, or he doesn't survive the operation. But without surgery, Bob will die. That's not a possibility. That's a certainty." The room fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Tommy's fingers gripped his phone so tightly, his knuckles went white. "How much?" Bob asked again. Barrett hesitated. "Let me get the financial advisor." "How much, Michael?" $85,000. "Give or take." Sarah made a sound like she'd been struck. Bob simply nodded, the number confirming what he'd already known in his bones. Impossible. Completely impossible. "We'll figure it out," Sarah said desperately. "Dad, we'll find a way." "I need to think about it." Bob stood on unsteady legs. "Bob, you don't have time to—" "I said I need to think." He walked out of the consultation room, past the nurse's station, through the emergency department doors into the parking lot. The night air hit him like cold water. Sarah called after him, but he kept walking. Tommy followed at a distance, phone still in his hand. Sarah caught up, grabbed Bob's arm. "Don't you dare give up," she said. "Don't you dare." But Bob pulled away gently and got into the car. Behind him, Barrett stood at the emergency room entrance, watching his oldest friend disappear into the darkness. Knowing exactly what Bob was thinking, knowing because 40 years ago Bob had made the same calculation, someone else's life over his own. Some things, Barrett realized, never changed. Sarah took 2 days off work. Her supervisor, a thin woman with perpetually pursed lips, delivered the warning in clipped tones. "You're already on thin ice, Hendricks. Another absence, and we'll need to discuss your future here." Sarah nodded numbly and left before the woman could see her hands shaking. She drove to her father's apartment, a place she'd only visited twice since he'd moved. The building sat in a neighborhood that had seen better decades, paint peeling from window frames, cracked concrete steps. Bob answered the door in an undershirt and pajama pants, looking diminished in a way that frightened her. "Dad, we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "Like hell there isn't." She pushed past him into the apartment. The space shocked her. Minimal furniture, bare walls, everything temporary and sparse. This wasn't a home. This was a holding pattern. She walked to the bedroom, then stopped in the doorway. "Where's all your stuff? Where's the furniture from the house?" "Sold most of it." "Why?" "Where's the house?" Bob turned away. Moving to the kitchen, Sarah followed, her nursing instincts shifting into investigative mode. She pulled open drawers, searching. In the third one, beneath takeout menus and batteries, she found the documents. House sale agreement, dated 6 months earlier. $280,000. Insurance cancellation notice. Health coverage terminated to save $450 monthly. Bank statement. Balance $3,212. Transfer receipt. $18,000 sent to Sarah Hendricks. The exact amount of her divorce settlement debt. Another receipt. $35,000 withdrawn from Tommy's college fund. Sarah's legs gave out. She sat hard on the kitchen floor, papers scattered around her. "You gave me everything. You gave me everything and kept nothing." Bob stood above her, jaw set. "It's my money. My choice. You're killing yourself. I'm taking care of my child. I'm 42 years old. I'm not a child. I'm your daughter, and you're committing suicide." She was screaming now, tears streaming. "You sold your home. You canceled your insurance. You gave away Tommy's future. For what? To pay off my ex-husband's lawyers. A father takes care of his children, not by dying." Sarah scrambled to her feet. "Not like this. Mom wouldn't want this. Don't." His voice went hard. "Don't bring her cooker into this. She's already in it. She's been in it since the day she died, and you decided to follow her." The words hung between them like a detonation. Bob's face crumpled, then rebuilt itself into stone. "I'd rather die than be a burden to you." Sarah stared at him. "You think you're protecting me? You think watching you give up isn't a burden, Dad? I'm going to lose you the same way I lost Mom, watching, helpless, unable to stop it." Her voice broke. "At least she fought. At least she wanted to stay." Bob flinched like she'd struck him. They didn't speak the rest of the afternoon. The next morning, Sarah sat across from Catherine Miller in the hospital's financial services office. The woman was younger than Sarah expected, late 30s, with severely pulled-back hair and eyes that showed no warmth. Kate slid the estimate across the desk. $85,000 total. "We require 50% upfront. That's $42,500 due before we can schedule the surgery." "My father will die without this operation. I understand, Ms. Hendricks. But hospital policy requires—" "He's dying." Sarah leaned forward, Do you understand what that means? Not sick, dying. Kate's expression flickered, something almost human crossing her features before the professional mask returned. Ma'am, I've seen hundreds of cases like your father's. The policy exists for a reason. We need $42,500 by day 12, or we release the operating room slot. Can we do a payment plan? After the surgery, not before. Sarah wanted to reach across the desk and shake this woman. Instead, she asked, "What if we can't pay? Then we cancel the procedure." Bob stood abruptly. "Cancel it, Dad, please." He walked out. Kate watched him go, and for just a moment, her professional facade cracked. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Then, realizing she'd broken protocol, she cleared her throat. "You have until day 12. And Sarah spent the afternoon on the phone. The bank loan officer listened to her application and checked her credit. "I'm sorry, Miss Hendricks. With your recent divorce and current debt-to-income ratio, we can't approve this amount." She called Marcus, her ex-husband. His voice dripped condescension. "That's not my problem, Sarah. Your father should have planned better. He gave me the money to pay you. Then he made poor financial choices. Maybe I should file to reduce child support since you're clearly in an unstable situation." She hung up on him and threw her phone across the room. That evening, George Walsh knocked on Bob's door carrying an envelope intact, a cashier's check for $15,000. "Take it," George said. "I can't take your life savings." "Betty would want this." George's voice was firm. 20 years ago, that car accident on Route 41. "You remember?" Bob frowned. "Vaguely." "You don't remember pulling my wife out of a burning vehicle, giving her CPR until the ambulance came?" George's eyes filled. "She lived another 18 years because of you. You saved her, Bobby. Let me save you." Bob's hands shook as he took the check. "It's not enough. I know, but it's a start." Over the next 2 days, Bob's community mobilized. Pastor David Hughes stood before his congregation and told them about one of their own who needed help. The collection plate filled with cash and checks, $8,000. Bob's old colleagues from the architecture firm heard through the grapevine. They pooled together another $3,000. Sarah counted everything on her kitchen table while Tommy watched from the doorway. $3,200 from Dad's account, $15,000 from George, $8,000 from the church. $3,000 from his old work. That's $29,200. "How much do we need?" Tommy asked. $42,500 up front, then another $42,500 after. She put her head in her hands. "We're not even close." Tommy stood there for a long moment. Then he went to his room and closed the door. He sat at his laptop and began researching. GoFundMe, Kickstarter, medical crowdfunding success stories. He read through hundreds of campaigns, studying which ones worked and why. The successful ones told stories. They showed the human behind the crisis. He opened a new document and began writing. Then he gathered photos. Bob, as a young man in military uniform, Bob and Jennifer on their wedding day, Bob holding baby Sarah, Bob and Tommy fishing last summer, both smiling. He recorded audio on his phone, playing back the conversation he'd captured 2 days ago when his grandfather didn't know. Tommy was listening. Bob's voice, tired and resigned. "I've lived 68 years. Georgie, good years. Sarah has her whole life ahead of her. George, don't talk like that. Bob, at least if I go, she won't drown in debt trying to save me. That's something. Tommy played it back 3 times, tears streaming down his face. Then he began editing a video. He worked through the night. His mother didn't know. His grandfather didn't know. At 1 in the morning, he uploaded everything to YouTube with a simple title, "My Grandpa Gave Everything. We have 48 hours to save him." He embedded the GoFundMe link in the description. Set the goal at $75,000, accounting for what they'd already raised. Added tags. Wrote a plea in the comments. His finger hovered over the publish button. If this didn't work, his grandfather would die. If it did work, but not in time, his grandfather would die. Either way, Tommy was helpless. He thought about the past year, the distance between him and everyone, the anger he'd carried since Grandma Jennifer died, the way he'd pushed his mother away, the way he'd ignored his grandfather's calls, all that wasted time. "I'm sorry I waited this long, Grandpa," he whispered. He clicked publish. The video went live at 1:37 in the morning. Tommy sent the link to 15 classmates with a message, "Please share, please." Then he closed his laptop, lay down fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling until dawn broke through his window. 4 days remained. Bob woke on day 10, knowing time was running out in ways that went beyond surgery schedules and hospital policies. His body was deteriorating. The headaches came in waves now, each one worse than the last. Objects doubled when he looked at them. Nausea rolled through him constantly. The hospital called Sarah's cell at noon. Kate Miller's voice, flat and professional. "We need confirmation on the deposit by tomorrow at noon, or we'll release the operating room slot." "We're trying," Sarah said. "I understand, but we have other patients waiting. I need an answer." "You'll have one." But she had no idea where that answer would come from. Bob spent the afternoon arranging his remaining affairs. He wrote down account numbers, passwords, the location of important documents. He composed emails to old friends, brief messages of goodbye disguised as catching up. He donated his clothes to Goodwill, keeping only what he'd need for the next few days. He cleaned his apartment until every surface gleamed, scrubbed the bathroom until his knees ached, organized his closet. He didn't want Sarah to come back to chaos after he was gone. At 11:30 that night, he sat at his kitchen table with a pen and paper. The blank page stared back at him. He'd written countless documents in his career as an architect. Proposals, specifications, contracts. Words had always come easily, but this letter fought him. He started over 3 times before the words finally flowed. "Dear Sarah, by the time you read this, I'll have made a decision you won't understand. Maybe you'll be angry. You have every right to be, but I need you to know this isn't about giving up. It's about letting go. There's a difference, though I know you won't see it that way." His hand shook as he continued. The pen scratched across paper, each word an excavation of things he'd never learned to say out loud. "I'm not strong enough to watch you sacrifice everything for a few more years of my life. I've already taken too much. The house, your savings, Tommy's future. I won't take more. I won't leave you drowning in debt, working yourself to death to pay off my medical bills. That's not love. That's selfishness." He paused, thinking of Jennifer, how she'd fought until the very end, every treatment, every clinical trial, burning through their savings without hesitation because she'd wanted to stay. He'd supported every decision, sold everything they owned to buy her more time. Why couldn't he do the same for himself? Because Jennifer had people who needed her. Sarah had been 39, newly divorced, struggling. Tommy had been 11, confused and hurt. Jennifer had reasons to fight. Bob had fulfilled his purpose. He'd raised his daughter. He'd been there when Jennifer needed him. What was left now but being a burden? "You were the best thing I ever built," he wrote. Not the buildings, not the awards, not the career. You're my legacy. You and Tommy, I'm so proud of who you've become. Your mother would be proud too. He told her not to have a funeral, told her to cremate him, scatter the ashes at the lake where he'd taught her to fish, told Tommy that his grandfather had been proud of him, even when he'd failed to show it. "I love you more than life itself," he finished. Literally. He folded the letter, placed it in an envelope with Sarah's name on the front, and set it on the kitchen table where she'd find it. Then he went to his bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and picked up the framed photo of Jennifer, her smile, forever frozen at 53. Before the cancer, before the treatments that had stolen her hair, her weight, her energy, before the end. "I'll see you soon, Jenny," he whispered. He lay down, closed his eyes, and waited for sleep that wouldn't come. At 3 in the morning, Sarah jolted awake from a nightmare she couldn't remember. Her heart pounded. Something felt wrong, urgently wrong, in a way she couldn't name. She checked her phone, no messages. But the feeling persisted. She got dressed and drove to her father's apartment, used her key to let herself in. The place was dark, silent, too clean, too organized, like a museum or a memorial. On the kitchen table, a white envelope caught the street light coming through the window. Her name in her father's careful architectural lettering. Her hands shook as she picked it up. She knew what it was before she opened it. She'd seen enough would-buy letters in her years as an ICU nurse. They all had the same weight, the same terrible finality. She read it once, then again. Then she was moving, running to his bedroom, slamming on the light. Bob jerked awake, disoriented and confused. Sarah stood in the doorway, letter clutched in her hand, face contorted with rage and grief. "What is this?" She held up the letter. "Sarah, You're giving up. You're just giving up. I'm letting go." "That's the same thing." "No." He sat up slowly. "Giving up is quitting. Letting go is accepting reality. Reality is I need you." She was shouting now, tears streaming. "Tommy needs you. We need you alive. You need me to not destroy your future with medical debt. I need you alive. Debt we can handle. Death we can't." They stared at each other across the small bedroom. Bob's face crumpled. The mask he'd worn for weeks finally shattered. "I'm scared, Sarah. God, I'm so scared." She crossed to him, sat on the bed, took his hands. "Of what? Of leaving you with nothing but bills. Of Tommy remembering me as the grandfather who gave up. Of failing your mother." His voice broke. "She told me on her deathbed to let you take care of me. She made me promise. And I can't even do that, right?" Sarah pulled him into her arms. This man who'd seemed invincible her entire childhood, he sobbed against her shoulder, and she held him the way he'd held her through kinned knees and broken hearts, and the night her marriage ended. "You haven't failed," she whispered. You're still here. You're still fighting by being scared. That's human, Dad. That's real. I don't know how to ask for help. I know, but I'm asking you to try. Please, for me, for Tommy, for Mom. They sat like that until dawn light crept through the window. Neither of them had solutions. The money still didn't exist. The deadline still loomed, but something had shifted in that bedroom, some wall that had stood between them since Jennifer's death finally crumbled. At 8 in the morning, Bob called the hospital. Kate Miller answered. "I want to discharge myself," he said, "against medical advice." Kate's pause was brief. "I'll process the paperwork." An hour later, Michael Barrett called Bob's cell. "Don't do this. It's done, Michael. You have 3 days. After that, I can't help you, even if you change your mind. I appreciate everything you've tried to do. Bob, please, for Tommy." Barrett's voice dropped. "For Jenny." The use of Jennifer's nickname hit Bob like a physical blow. Barrett had called her that in college, before Bob had won her heart. Hearing it now, after 30 years, reminded him that once they'd been brothers in everything but blood. "I've made my peace," Bob said. "Have you?" "Because it doesn't sound like peace. It sounds like pride." Bob ended the call. Tommy had been standing in the doorway, listening to everything. Now his grandfather looked at him, and Tommy saw something he'd never seen before. Defeat. Complete and absolute. "I'm sorry, kid," Bob said. Tommy said nothing. He turned and walked out of the apartment, tears blurring his vision. He went home, straight to his room, and opened his laptop. The video had been live for 30 hours. He clicked refresh on the YouTube page, 127,000 views. His heart stopped. He refreshed again, thinking it was an error, 129,000 views. The GoFundMe page, $12,340 from 892 people. It was happening, slowly, but it was happening. He looked at the calendar. Day 10. They needed the money by noon tomorrow. They needed 42,500 total. They were still 30,000 short. Tommy closed his eyes and did something he hadn't done since his grandmother died. He prayed. Days 11 and 12 blurred together in a haze of preparation and acceptance. Bob moved through his apartment like a ghost, touching objects with the reverence of someone saying goodbye. He spent an hour organizing his desk drawer, another hour sorting through old photographs, setting aside ones he thought Sarah and Tommy might want to keep. George Walsh arrived unannounced on the morning of day 11, let himself in with the key Bob had given him years ago. He found Bob at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. "We didn't survive the war to die from pride. Bobby," George said, sitting down across from him. Bob looked at his friend. George's face was weathered, carved by decades of sun and hardship and memories neither of them talked about. "Maybe pride is all I have left. Georgie, you have me. You have Sarah and Tommy. Isn't that enough?" "It has to be enough for them to have a future without me." George's eyes filled. "I can't watch you do this. I can't bury another person I love because they were too stubborn to accept help. I'm not asking you to watch." George stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. "Betty would be ashamed of you." He walked out without looking back. Bob sat alone in the silence that followed. That afternoon, Pastor David Hughes organized a prayer service at the church. Sarah found out through a phone tree and drove there, hoping to see an outpouring of support. What she found instead broke something inside her. 12 people in the pews, all of them elderly, all of them looking lost and uncertain. Mrs. Patricia Donnelly sat in the third row, her expression more judgmental than compassionate. Pastor Hughes led them in prayer, his voice echoing in the mostly empty sanctuary. Lord, we ask for your mercy for Robert Hendricks, a man who has given much to this community. When it ended, Sarah approached Mrs. Donnelly, desperate for any connection. Thank you for coming. The older woman sniffed. Well, I suppose we should try, though perhaps it's simply God's will. He's lived a full life. Sarah felt rage flash through her. He's 68 years old. He's not ancient. He's my father. I only meant that we all must accept when our time comes. Dear, making a fuss won't change the Lord's plan. Sarah turned and walked out before she said something she'd regret. In her car, she gripped the steering wheel and screamed until her throat was raw. Meanwhile, Sarah had returned to work, unable to afford any more unpaid leave. She moved through her ICU shift like a zombie, performing tasks from muscle memory alone. Check the IV line, adjust the ventilator, monitor vitals, document everything, but her mind was elsewhere. With her father, with the deadline looming, with the money they didn't have and the time they'd run out of. Sarah, her colleague's voice cut through the fog. Sarah, you need to check this pump. She looked down. The IV pump was beeping. She'd set the wrong rate. It was a small error. It was caught quickly, but it could have been serious. Her supervisor appeared at her elbow. My office, now. In the small administrative room, the woman's face was harder than usual. You're not fit to work. You're a liability. I need every shift. I need the money. If you make another mistake, someone dies. Go home. Sarah, take a leave of absence. I can't afford leave. You can't afford to kill someone either. The supervisor's voice softened slightly. I'm not trying to be cruel, but you're not present. You're dangerous like this. Sarah walked out of the hospital in a daze. In the nurse's break room, her colleagues had left an envelope with her name on it, inside $800 in cash and checks. A note, for your dad, we're rooting for him. $800. Against the $30,000 they still needed, it was nothing. It was everything. She sat in her car and cried until she had no tears left. That night, as Sarah lay in bed unable to sleep, memories assaulted her. She was 6 years old, and her father was teaching her to ride a bicycle in the park, his large hands steadying the seat, his voice patient and encouraging. I got you, sweetheart. I won't let you fall. She was 18, leaving for college, and he was crying, even though he tried to hide it. I'm so proud of you, baby girl. She was 39, signing divorce papers, and he was there in the lawyer's office, his presence silent support. Afterwards, he'd taken her to the diner where they'd eaten breakfast every Saturday of her childhood. He hadn't said much, just been there. Now, she was 42, and he was preparing to die rather than accept her help. The parallel struck her with brutal clarity. Her father had spent his entire life holding others up. He'd given his wife the chance to fight cancer. Until the end, he'd given Sarah the money to start over after her divorce. He'd given Tommy a college fund, but he couldn't bear being held up himself. She got out of bed and went to Tommy's room. Her son was still awake, laptop open, the glow illuminating his young face. He looked up when she entered, and she saw he'd been crying. "Mom." The video has 150,000 views now, but we only have $18,000. It's not enough. It's not going to be enough. Sarah sat on the edge of his bed. "You tried, baby. You tried so hard. Why won't people help? Don't they care? Most people are struggling themselves, and some—" She thought of Mrs. Donnelly. Some people think suffering is inevitable, that trying to fight it is prideful. That's stupid. Yeah, it is. They sat together in silence. Then Tommy showed her the comments on the video. Hundreds of them now, some offering prayers, some sharing their own stories of loss, some asking why they should donate to someone who'd made poor financial choices. One comment stood out. "He's old anyway. Let nature take its course." Said Tommy had replied, "My grandfather is a human being who gave his whole life helping others. If we can't save people like him, what's the point of anything?" Sarah hugged her son tightly. When had he grown up? When had he become this person who understood what really mattered? Bob spent day 12 preparing. He showered, shaved, dressed in his best clothes, sorted through the remainder of his belongings, labeling boxes for Sarah, put fresh sheets on the bed so she wouldn't have to deal with that detail later. At 6 in the evening, he made himself dinner, scrambled eggs and toast. He ate slowly, tasting everything, trying to make it matter. The food was bland and perfect. He thought about Jennifer, how she'd insisted on eating real meals even when chemotherapy made everything taste like metal. How she'd said every moment counted, even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones. The phone rang. Sarah. He let it go to voicemail. She called again. Again. Finally he picked up. "Dad, please don't do this." "I love you, Sarah. That's not fair. You don't get to say that and then give up." "I'm not giving up. I'm giving you a future. A future without you isn't a future I want." He could hear her crying. It tore at him. "You'll understand someday. When you're a parent, you'll understand there's nothing you wouldn't sacrifice for your child. I'm 42 years old. Stop treating me like a child who needs protecting. You'll always be my baby girl." Sarah's voice turned to steel. "If you do this, I'll never forgive you. Never." Bob closed his eyes. "I can live with that, as long as you live." He hung up. The apartment fell silent. Out 6. The city moved on, indifferent to his private apocalypse. Cars passed. Someone laughed on the street below. Life continuing while his ended. He sat in his armchair and picked up the photo of Jennifer one more time. Traced her smile with his finger. "I tried, Jenny," he whispered. "I tried to do what you asked, but I can't. I can't be their burden. You understand, don't you?" The photograph didn't answer. It never would. That was the cruelest part of death. The conversations that could never happen. The forgiveness that could never be granted or denied. Bob set the photo down and closed his eyes. In another part of the city. Tommy sat at his laptop, refreshing the GoFundMe page every few minutes. The number climbed slowly. 20,000, 21,000, 22,000. Not enough. Never going to be enough. At 1:37 in the morning, he checked one more time before trying to sleep. $23,800. They needed 42,500 by noon, less than 11 hours away. Tommy closed his laptop. In the darkness of his room, he made a decision. If his grandfather was going to die, Tommy wouldn't waste the time he had left being angry or distant. He'd go to him in the morning, tell him everything he should have said over the past year, all the I love yous he'd swallowed, all the moments he'd been too proud or too hurt to reach out. He'd tell his grandfather that he forgave him for everything and nothing, just forgive him for being human. It wouldn't change the outcome, but maybe it would mean something anyway. Tommy finally fell asleep as dawn approached, his phone still in his hand, the screen dark. The miracle he'd hoped for, still thousands of dollars away. Tommy woke at 7 on day 13 to his phone vibrating insistently. Notifications flooded his screen. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, text messages from people he barely knew. His heart hammered as he fumbled with the phone, trying to understand what was happening. The video had gone viral overnight. 2.8 million views. The number seemed impossible. He refreshed. 2.9 million. Refreshed again. 3 million. The GoFundMe page loaded slowly, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped the phone. $47,200. He stared at the number, certain he was misreading it. Refreshed. 51,300. Mom. His voice cracked. Mom, you need to see this. Sarah stumbled into his room, still in her pajamas, eyes puffy from crying herself to sleep. Tommy shoved the phone at her. She looked at the screen, frowned, looked again. Is this real? I think so. I don't know. Mom, it's happening. It's actually happening. She sat down hard on his bed, scrolling through the donations. $50 from someone in Oregon. $20 from a single mother in Texas with the note, I understand struggle, you're not alone. $5 from an 8-year-old girl in Florida, from my piggy bank for Tommy's grandpa. Hundreds of donations, thousands, from strangers across the country who'd watched a 14-year-old boy plead for his grandfather's life and decided to help. The comment section had exploded, people sharing their own stories of loss, of medical debt, of impossible choices. Arguments erupting between those who believed Bob deserved help and those who questioned why strangers should pay for his mistakes. One user had written, "This is everything wrong with America. Healthcare shouldn't depend on going viral." Another replied, "Maybe, but while we wait for the system to change, this man dies. So shut up and donate or get out of the way." Sarah's phone rang. She answered without checking the caller ID. Hello, Ms. Hendricks. This is Dr. Barrett. I saw Tommy's video. Dr. Barrett, I'm so sorry. This is embarrassing. I didn't know he was going to... Don't apologize. Listen to me carefully. I'm waiving my surgical fee. All $20,000 of it. Sarah's breath caught. What? Why would you? Because 30 years ago, your father could have destroyed me, and he didn't. Barrett's voice was thick with emotion. After your mother chose him, I fell apart, dropped out of classes, started drinking. I was going to quit medical school entirely. Your father found me in my apartment, barely functioning, and he pulled me out of it. As Sarah had never heard this story, her parents had never mentioned it. He tutored me, made sure I ate, covered for me when I missed classes. He never told anyone, not even Jennifer, how bad it got. He protected my reputation. And when I applied to medical school, he wrote my recommendation letters. Barrett paused. I owe him my career, my life. This is the least I can do. Thank you, Sarah whispered. Thank you so much. There's something else. My daughter Emma was born with a congenital heart defect. When she was 10, she needed an emergency blood transfusion, rare type. Oh, negative. We put out a call and someone responded immediately. His voice broke. It was your father. He probably doesn't even remember, but Emma is alive because of him. Sarah closed her eyes, tears streaming. He never told me. That's who he is. He gives quietly. Barrett cleared his throat. Emma is a nurse now. She's volunteering to assist in the surgery. No charge. She wants to be there when we save the man who saved her. After they hung up, Sarah sat motionless, processing everything. Her father had touched so many lives, left fingerprints on so many souls, and never thought to mention it, never expected anything in return. Tommy was refreshing the GoFundMe compulsively. We're at $68,000 now. Mom, we're going to make it. But Sarah was already dialing the hospital. Kate Miller answered on the second ring. Ms. Hendricks, I was about to call you. It's almost noon. Do you have the deposit? We're close. The GoFundMe is still climbing. Can you give us more time? A long pause. Hold, please. Sarah waited, each second an eternity. Tommy stood beside her, both of them frozen. Kate came back on the line. Ms. Hendricks, the hospital administrator, saw your son's video. It's been forwarded to him by several board members. Due to the publicity, the hospital has agreed to discount the facility fees by $15,000. What? The final cost will be $70,000 instead of $85,000. That's good public relations for the hospital. Kate's voice was carefully neutral, but Sarah detected something underneath, a hint of humanity breaking through the bureaucratic facade. And I'm expediting all the paperwork. If you can confirm funding by end of business today, we can schedule the surgery for tomorrow morning at 5:30. We can pay. We have the money. Sarah's voice shook. Or we will by the end of the day. I'll let you hold of the operating room. But, Ms. Hendricks, I need confirmation by 5 p. If you can't guarantee payment, I have to release the slot. You'll have it. I promise. After she hung up, Sarah grabbed Tommy and pulled him into a fierce hug. You did this. You saved him. We're not done yet. We still need to tell Grandpa. They drove to Bob's apartment together. Sarah used her key, calling out as she entered, Dad, Dad, where are you? They found him in the bedroom, lying on top of the covers, fully dressed. He looked diminished. His skin gray, his breathing shallow. The swelling behind his ear had grown worse, despite the earlier drainage, angry red and grotesque. Dad, wake up. Sarah shook his shoulder gently. His eyes opened slowly, struggling to focus. Sarah, what time is it? A little after noon, Dad. We need to talk to you. I told you, I'm not changing my mind. Tommy stepped forward, holding out his iPad. Grandpa, just watch this, please. Bob took the tablet with the trembling hands. Tommy pressed play. The video began with photos Bob hadn't seen in years. Himself in military uniform, young and proud. His wedding day, Jennifer radiant beside him, baby Sarah in his arms. Buildings he'd designed. Community centers, libraries, schools. places where people learned and grew and lived. Then Tommy's voice, narrating over the images. My grandpa worked 40 years as an architect. He built places for people, safe places, good places. Photos of Jennifer sick, then her funeral. 2 years ago, my grandma died. He gave everything to pay her medical bills, everything. The documentation appeared on screen, the house sale, the transfer to Sarah, the college fund withdrawal. 6 months ago, my mom needed help. He sold his house. He took my college money to help her. He kept nothing for himself. Then the audio recording. Bob's own voice. I've lived 68 years, Georgie. Good years. Sarah has her whole life ahead of her. At least, if I go, she won't drown in debt trying to save me. Tommy appeared on camera, tears streaming down his face. He taught me to never give up, but he's given up on himself because he thinks being strong means doing it alone. I think being strong means asking for help when you need it. We have 48 hours to raise the money for his surgery. Please, he's not just my grandpa. He's proof that good people exist, and good people shouldn't have to die because of money. The video ended. Bob stared at the screen, tears running down his weathered face. Tommy, what did you do? What you and Mom were too proud to do? I asked for help. Now Tommy pulled up the GoFundMe page. Look, the number had climbed to $89,000 from 12,000 people, strangers across the country, each giving what they could. Bob scrolled through the comments, his hands shaking. I'm a stranger, but I donated $50. This is what family means. Healthcare system failed him, but we won't. I lost my father to pride. Don't let this man make the same mistake. Some comments were cruel. Why should I pay for his poor planning? He's old. Let nature take its course. But for every hateful comment, 10 more defended him, argued for Tim, fought for his right to live. I don't understand, Bob whispered. These people don't know me. They know enough, Sarah said. They know you're worth saving. Bob looked at his grandson, this boy who'd barely spoken to him in a year, this boy who'd spent the past months locked in his room, angry at the world. This boy had done what Bob couldn't. He'd been vulnerable. He'd asked for help. I'm sorry, Bob said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry I made you do this. Tommy sat beside him on the bed. You didn't make me do anything. You taught me to fight for what matters. So I did. I fought for you. Bob pulled him into an embrace, and Tommy held on tight. This grandfather, who'd seemed invincible, now feeling fragile and human in his arms. Sarah's phone rang. To Barrett again. Sarah, I wanted you to know the surgical team is assembling. We're planning for tomorrow morning, 5:30 a.m., but there's something else you should know. What? The surgery is more dangerous than I initially indicated. The cholesteatoma has grown into the dura, the lining of the brain. When we remove it, there's a significant chance of bleeding, infection, or stroke, and there's a possibility he won't wake up the same. Memory loss, cognitive changes. You need to understand the risks. And Sarah's blood ran cold. What are his chances? With surgery, 60% survival. Without surgery, 0%. But that 60% assumes everything goes perfectly. Reality is always messier. After she relayed this to Bob, he fell silent for a long moment. Then he looked at Sarah and Tommy. These two people who'd fought so hard for him when he wouldn't fight for himself. "I want to do it," he said quietly. "I want the surgery." Sarah exhaled in relief. "Okay, okay. We'll tell them yes. But first, I need to say something." Bob took both their hands. "I've been a coward. I've hidden behind pride and called it protection. I've pushed you away and called it love. Your mother told me before she died to let you take care of me, and I couldn't do it. I thought being strong meant standing alone. Dad, let me finish. Tommy, you're 14 years old, and you're braver than I've been in 68 years. You asked thousands of strangers for help because you knew that's what love requires. Vulnerability, trust, faith in other people's goodness." His voice broke. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave up on myself." They sat together on that bed, 3 generations bound by blood and crisis and love, while outside the numbers continued to climb. By 3 p.m., the GoFundMe had reached $127,000, far exceeding what they needed. The excess would go to others. They decided to people facing the same impossible choices, to families drowning in medical debt, to anyone who needed proof that strangers could become family when it mattered most. At 4 p.m., Sarah called the hospital and confirmed payment. Kate Miller processed the paperwork with unusual speed. "Surgery is scheduled for tomorrow, 5:30 a.m. Don't eat or drink anything after midnight tonight." And Ms. Hendricks, "Yes. Tell your son his video reminded me why I went into health care. To help people, not to judge them. My father died because we couldn't afford his treatment. I've spent years enforcing policies I hate because I thought that's what strength looked like. Your family taught me I was wrong." That evening, Bob's phone wouldn't stop ringing. George Walsh called, crying with relief. Pastor Hughes called with prayers and blessings. Former colleagues called, offering support. Even some of the GoFundMe donors called, wanting to tell Bob personally that his life mattered to them. But the call that meant the most came from Michael Barrett. "Bob, I need to tell you something I should have said 30 years ago. I was jealous. When Jennifer chose you, I was devastated. I let that jealousy poison our friendship. I've regretted it every day since. Tomorrow, I get to save your life. Let me do this. Let this be how I say I'm sorry. Michael, you don't owe me. I do. And Jenny would want this. She'd want us to be brothers again." Bob closed his eyes, hearing his wife's name spoken with such love by the man who'd also loved her. "Okay, brother, okay." That night, Bob couldn't sleep. He lay in bed thinking about all the ways his life had been saved by strangers who gave $5, by a friend who gave his savings, by a doctor who gave his fee, by a grandson who gave his pride, by a daughter who gave everything. He'd spent so long thinking he had nothing left to offer the world, but maybe that was the point. Maybe grace only worked when you had nothing left. When you were empty and broken and had to let others fill you up. At 3 a.m, he got out of bed and wrote one more letter. Not goodbye this time. Thank you. He was still writing when dawn broke through his window, painting everything gold. At 8 p.m. on day 13, Bob developed a fever. Sarah had stayed with him after the emotional events of the day, and she felt the heat radiating from his skin when she checked on him before bed. The thermometer read 102.5 degrees. She called Barrett immediately. He answered on the first ring. How high? 102.5 and climbing. The infection is spreading from the cholestoma. Get him to the hospital now. We'll start IV antibiotics. But Sarah, you need to understand, if the fever doesn't break by midnight, we have to postpone the surgery. What happens if we postpone? We hit day 14 tomorrow morning. After that, the window closes. The mass will be inoperable. His voice was grim. If we can't operate tomorrow, we can't operate at all. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Bob shivered despite the fever, his body confused by the infection raging through him. Tommy sat in the back seat, silent and terrified. They admitted Bob immediately. Dr. Barrett met them in the emergency department, already in scrubs. We're taking him to ICU, maximum dose antibiotics. If his body responds, we operate at 5:30. If not, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. In the intensive care unit, they started 3 different antibiotics through Bob's IV. Sarah sat beside his bed. A nurse, again rather than a daughter, monitoring the numbers on the machines with professional detachment that barely masked her terror. Tommy pulled a chair into the corner and sat with his phone, scrolling through the thousands of comments on his video. People were still donating, still sharing, still praying. Word had spread about the surgery scheduled for tomorrow. The comment section had become a vigil, praying for Bob tonight. Come on, old man, you got to fight. My whole church is up praying. God's got this. I'm an atheist, but I'm sending every good thought I have. Live, damn it. At 10 p. Bob's fever was 101.8. Still too high. George Walsh arrived, let into the ICU by a sympathetic nurse who bent the visitor rules. He sat on the other side of Bob's bed and took his friend's hand. They didn't speak. They'd said everything that needed saying over 50 years of friendship. At 11, Pastor Hughes appeared with 30 members of his congregation. They couldn't all fit in the ICU, so they gathered in the waiting room. Each person held a small candle. They prayed in whispers, their voices creating a hum that echoed through the hallways. At 11:15, people started arriving from unexpected places. Bob's former colleagues from the architecture firm, neighbors from his old house, the cashier from his grocery store who'd seen the video, a veteran from George's unit who'd driven 3 hours to be there. By 11:30, 60 people filled the waiting room and spilled into the hallway. Strangers who donated to the GoFundMe, parents with their children, teaching them what community meant. A young woman who'd been saved by blood donation and wanted to pay respect to a man who'd done the same for someone else. Emma Barrett, Barrett's daughter, came in wearing her nursing scrubs. She was 25, with her father's eyes and a calm competence in her movements. She approached Sarah in the ICU. Ms. Hendricks, I'm Emma. I wanted to introduce myself before tomorrow. Sarah stood, shaking her hand. Your father told me what my dad did for you. I wouldn't be alive without him. He donated blood when I was 10, rare type. I needed it immediately, and he responded without hesitation. My dad told me years later. Emma looked at Bob, unconscious and feverish. I've built my whole nursing career around paying that forward. Tomorrow, I get to help save the man who saved me. At 11:45, the fever was 101 degrees, close, but not close enough. Normal temperature was 98.6. They needed him under 100 to operate safely. Barrett checked the monitors, his expression unreadable. 15 minutes, he said to no one in particular. Tommy couldn't sit anymore. He paced the small ice room, his phone clutched in his hand. The live count on his video had reached 4.2 million views. The GoFundMe had surpassed $150,000. The world was watching. The world was praying. But none of it mattered if his grandfather's body couldn't fight off this infection. At 11:55, Sarah held the thermometer to Bob's forehead. The digital display blinked. She looked at the number, then looked again. 99.9 degrees. "Dr. Barrett?" she called, her voice shaking. He crossed to the bed, checked the reading himself, then checked Bob's oral temperature to confirm 99.8. The fever had broken with 5 minutes to spare. Barrett closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were wet. "Prep for surgery? We operate in 6 hours." A nurse went to the waiting room to share the news. The sound that rose from the assembled crowd was part cheer, part sob. Wholly human. People embraced strangers. Someone started singing. Others joined in, their voices carrying through the sterile hospital corridors, a hymn about grace and mercy and second chances. Tommy sat down hard in his chair, his legs given out. Sarah pulled him close, and they held each other while their patriarch slept on. His body having won a battle he didn't even know he was fighting. At 4 a.m, they woke Bob to prep him for surgery. He was groggy, confused by all the tubes and machines. Sarah helped him into a hospital gown while a nurse shaved the side of his head where they'd need to access the cholestoma. "There are people outside," Bob said, his voice hoarse. "I heard them singing." "About 60 people," Sarah told him. "Some from the video, some who've known you for years, all waiting. For me, for you, Dad." At 5 a.m., they wheeled Bob to the preoperative area. Sarah and Tommy walked alongside the gurney, each holding one of his hands. The hallway seemed impossibly long. Before the operating room doors, they stopped. This was as far as family could go. Sarah leaned down, kissing her father's forehead. "I'll be here when you wake up, I promise." Tommy took his grandfather's hand. "Grandpa, thank you for teaching me what strength really means. Not doing it alone, doing it together." Bob's eyes filled. "I'm sorry I waited this long. I love you both so much. Just, we know, Dad. We've always known." Dr. Barrett appeared in surgical scrubs, Emma beside him, both masked and ready. "It's time." "Bob." Bob looked at Michael, his oldest friend, the man he'd loved and lost and found again. "I'm ready." They wheeled him through the doors. Sarah and Tommy walked back to the waiting room where their strange congregation had gathered. People made space for them, offering chairs, water, tissues, prayers. George stood when they entered. He'd brought Bob's fellow veterans, 15 men ranging from 60 to 80 years old. They formed a line and, as one, raised their hands in military salute. "No man left behind," George said. "That includes Bobby." The surgery was scheduled for 4 hours. Dr. Barrett had explained the procedure in detail. They'd remove the cholestoma carefully, trying not to damage the facial nerve or the hearing apparatus. They'd repair the eroded bone. They'd clean out the infection. If everything went perfectly, Bob would recover with minimal complications. If things went wrong, he'd die on the table or wake up paralyzed, or wake up but not remember who he was. Sarah tried not to think about the possibilities. Instead, she focused on the people around her. Mrs. Patricia Donnelly, the neighbor who'd suggested Bob's illness was God's will, had arrived with coffee and apologies. "I was wrong," she said simply. "I'm sorry." Kate Miller, the hospital financial advisor, sat in the back of the waiting room. Few people knew she was there. She'd come in civilian clothes, off duty, just another person hoping for a miracle. When Sarah noticed her, their eyes met. Kate gave a small nod. Sarah nodded back. At 7 a.m., 2 hours into surgery, a nurse came out to update them. "Everything is proceeding as planned. Barrett wanted you to know he's making good progress." The relief was palpable. People who'd been holding their breath for hours finally exhaled. At 8:30, another update. "We've removed the cholesteatoma. Now we're repairing the bone structure. Still on track." But at 9:15, the nurse's face was different when she appeared, more serious. The room fell silent. "There was a complication, some bleeding when we removed the mass from the dura. Dr. Barrett has it under control, but it's extended the surgery time. We're estimating another 2 hours." Sarah felt the floor tilt. Tommy grabbed her hand, his grip tight enough to hurt. They waited. Minutes crawled by like hours. Sarah found herself praying to her mother. "Mom, if you're there, if you can hear me, please, please don't take him yet. We just got him back." At 10:45, the OR doors opened. Dr. Barrett emerged, still in his surgical gown, mask pulled down. His face was exhausted, drawn, but he was smiling. He made it. The waiting room erupted. People laughed and cried and embraced. Sarah couldn't move, couldn't speak, could only stare at Michael Barrett as he walked toward her. "It was close. We almost lost him twice during the bleeding. But he fought, Sarah. God, he fought." Barrett's voice broke. "He's strong. Stronger than any of us gave him credit for. Can we see him? He's in recovery. Give him about 2 hours. Then you can go in. But Sarah, I need you to understand. He's going to be confused when he wakes up. The anesthesia, the trauma to the area near his brain, it can affect memory temporarily. Don't be alarmed if he doesn't recognize you at first." 2 hours later, they let Sarah and Tommy into the recovery room. Bob lay still, bandages wrapped around his head, tubes running from his arms, monitors beeping steadily. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow but regular. Sarah took his hand. "Dad, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then slowly clearing. He looked at Sarah's face. For 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. There was no recognition in his expression. Sarah's heart stopped. "Dad, it's me. Then something shifted. His eyes focused. Awareness returned. "Sarah," he whispered, "my baby girl." She collapsed against him, sobbing. Tommy moved to the other side of the bed, and Bob reached for him too. "Tommy, you're here." "We're both here, Grandpa. We're both here." "I'm still here," Bob said, wonder in his voice. "I'm still here." The room filled with flowers over the next hours, cards from strangers, gifts from people who'd donated, balloons from children who'd emptied their piggy banks. The nurses had to bring in extra tables to hold everything. Bob read the cards one by one, tears streaming. "I don't know these people." "They know you," Sarah said. "Or at least they know what you represent. Second chances, community. The idea that we're not as alone as we think. That evening, Barrett came to check on his patient and his friend. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck, but alive." Barrett pulled up a chair. "Bob, I need to tell you something. During the surgery, when we were losing you, I remembered something, your wedding day. I was standing there as your best man, watching you marry the woman we both loved, and I was so angry. But then I looked at your face when Jenny walked down the aisle, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Pure joy, complete certainty. You looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing." Bob listened, silent. "I realized in that moment that you loved her in a way I never could, more than I wanted her. I wanted her to be happy, and you made her happy. For 29 years until cancer took her, you made her happy." Barrett's voice was thick. "I spent 30 years resenting you for that. What a waste. What a stupid waste. Michael, let me finish. Today, when we almost lost you on that table, when the bleeding wouldn't stop and your pressure dropped, I realized I couldn't lose you. Not to death and not to pride. Jenny would never forgive me, and I'd never forgive myself." He gripped Bob's hand. "Brothers. We're brothers again." "Okay. Brothers." Bob agreed. "Always were. I'm sorry it took this long to get back there." They sat together in the recovery room, two old men who'd loved the same woman and let it divide them, now reunited by crisis and grace and the stubborn refusal to let go. 1 month later, Bob walked unassisted for the first time since surgery. He'd spent weeks in physical therapy, relearning balance, building strength. The tumor had been removed completely. The infection cleared. He'd lost hearing in his right ear permanently, and his smile was slightly crooked from minor nerve damage. But he was alive. He stood at Sarah's stove making breakfast for the first time in years. Tommy sat at the table doing homework. Sarah came in from her morning run, and for a moment she stopped in the doorway and simply watched. Her father cooking, her son studying, both in the same room, both present. "What are you looking at?" Bob asked, noticing her. "My family," she said. "All together." They ate breakfast, the three of them, and talked about ordinary things. Tommy's upcoming math test, Sarah's promotion to nurse manager, Bob's plans to volunteer at the free clinic Dr. Barrett was opening. After breakfast, Bob and Tommy drove to Lake Michigan. They set up their fishing poles just as dawn broke over the water. The morning was cold, but the sky was clear. "Grandpa," Tommy said after a long silence, "I'm sorry I didn't talk to you for so long. After Grandma died, I was so angry at God, at the world, at you for not being sad enough where I could see it. I was sad. Kid, I just didn't know how to show it. I know that now. I should have known it then." They sat quietly, lines in the water, watching the sun climb higher. Bob thought about all the mornings like this he'd almost missed, all the conversations he'd almost never had, all the love he'd almost thrown away because he was too proud to be vulnerable. "Tommy, you saved my life. You taught me how to save it. You taught me that family means showing up even when it's hard, even when you're scared, especially then." Bob pulled his grandson close, and they sat like that as the fish avoided their hooks, and the world turned and life continued in all its messy, beautiful complication. Robert Hendricks spent 68 years building things, schools where children learned, libraries where minds opened, community centers where neighbors became friends. But the most important structure he almost destroyed was the one he couldn't design or control: his family. He learned what so many of us forget in our pride and independence. Asking for help isn't weakness. It's the ultimate act of love for those who love us. When we refuse assistance, we don't protect our children from burden. We deny them the chance to give back what we've given them their entire lives. We rob them of purpose when they need it most. Bob thought he was saving Sarah and Tommy by choosing to die rather than accept their help. Instead, he was teaching them that their love wasn't enough, that he'd rather leave them with grief than let them feel useful. The real burden wasn't medical debt. It was watching him give up. Sometimes the strongest thing we can say is, "I need you." Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stay and let others hold us up the way we've held them. Because in the end, we're measured not by what we built alone, but by who stands with us when everything falls. What have you been too proud to ask for help with? When did someone's vulnerability allow you to show them love? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.